Okay, so now we transition from music to, it's kind of funny that we are just hanging up here. So since Angie's already up here, I'm just going to give her a wonderful hug and introduce Greg to come on up. So come on up, Mr. Greg.
Yay.
Thanks for being here.
Greg. Super excited about today. Yay! And,
so did anyone else TiVo the professional wrestling?
No.
No one?
No one said professional wrestling, you have my undivided attention. No one, babe. No one did that. I guess you're the only one.
I do have a colleague, I don't do it, but I do have a colleague at work, and it's her dirty little secret that she likes to hide from everybody.
That's so funny. I knew a guy when
But she admitted it to us after about a year of us knowing. She's like, yes, we're going this weekend to watch professional wrestling.
That's hilarious. So I knew a guy in grad school, and he was scrawny, like really scrawny. And he's like, yeah, I'm super into wrestling. And I was like, oh, so you watch? He's like, no, I wrestle. And I was like, really? And he's like, yes. So I didn't know it was sumo wrestling. And I didn't know that you could sumo wrestle as a skinny white guy whose legs are like this. So I know, right? What? Do you have like a hair suit? No, it was real sumo wrestling. And like you prepare and you mental and you train and then you wear the diaper thingy and you, yeah, it's like a thing.
Oh, there was a word for that, and it's not diaper.
There is, but I call it the diaper.
If I needed to phone a friend, I could phone my friend.
It goes right here, just in case. So it's not a full coverage diaper, just saying.
Because I have another colleague
anyway, I watched
who's
him
big into sumo.
Yeah.
He like knows the whole thing.
So,
he could tell you what that diaper is called. I cannot.
I know. Like, we can look it up. Someone will know before the service is over. Anybody follow NCIS? Anyone? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. One. Really? Really? What, do you guys have something more important to do than waste your life watching TV? Oh, nobody was listening. Gotcha. NCIS. Anybody follow NCIS with Gibbs? Not like. Okay. So how many seasons behind are we? Like, I don't know.
I know. We're watching the 2000 whatever.
Okay. So anyway. Gibbs, of course, once again, his life was threatened. Once again, he was tortured in a foreign country. Once again, he survived. So I don't know, this is like, the 20th time he's been caught, tortured, almost killed. But this time, instead of coming down even more shut down than he was before, he came back joyful and communicative. And this has wrecked Greg's world. His hero has fallen. So far.
I don't think it's going to last, though. He's going to return to his...
He's hoping he will return to his dour, non-communicative, caveman-like self.
Functional mute-like self.
Yes. Right? Greg's so disappointed. Can't even tell you how disappointed he is that Gibbs has evolved. I know, seriously. All right,
evolved.
We're gonna release kids because I am super excited about what we're gonna do next. So we are releasing kiddos to go. Thank you so much. Miss Gisandra is not here, so children of all ages are going. Yes. You guys get to go to the big kids class. It's so exciting. So great. It's gonna be awesome. So, it's going to be so fun, Hopi. You're going to love it. But, Okay.
I think maybe Eleanor and Genevieve are already there because I don't see them in the lineup.
Yeah, they're already on their way. Okay. So, I'm super jazzed about today because I really, really wanted to share some things that I discovered during my Enneagram certification that I did in Vegas. And I really didn't think the Lord would let me share because usually it's a really, really long time before I share stuff. But he was like, let's go for it. And so I'm super excited because I felt like the Lord was just teaching me so much about myself and about what is happening with people and what's happening with me and what's happening with relationships. And then he just like turned this corner and said, and let's talk about what's happened at my tribe in Desert Outpouring. So I'm really, really excited about what I felt like he taught me. So some of the stuff I'm going to share Lindsay's going to go, we did not learn that at the Enneagram, because Lindsay was there also. She'll go, that was not there at all. Nobody was talking about that. So there's a whole bunch of this that was really what the Lord was showing me while I'm sitting in the room, right? Because that happens. And then there was also what was happening there. Do you want to comment on that?
When you were laying in the back of the room.
I was laying in the back of the room. My back was hurting a little bit, so I was kicking back, laying back, having lots of conversations with the Lord. That's the true story. So, how many of you are like totally not familiar with the Enneagram, including you? Totally not. Anyone else? Totally not familiar. Darby, you're not familiar, but you're not listening, right? Are you? Well, maybe you are. Well, okay. So, for those of you who don't know, Enneagram has a long history. People are trying to trace its roots back to like Plato and Aristotle. That's a bit of a stretch, but kind of not. But anywho, it's a theory, a philosophy about people. It is essentially categorizing people into 9 different categories. And the categories are meant to be a tool to help you understand your own process and your own journey and the coping mechanisms that you may have developed in life. So it's not personality per se. So this is my favorite one, The Wisdom of the Enneagram. There's lots of other resources out there, but this is to me like the most comprehensive Cliff Note version of the Enneagram. And it also speaks to the purpose of the Enneagram really being about recognizing the coping mechanisms that you have developed in life to deal with whatever pain or challenge or feedback mechanism that you experienced in childhood. So it's not saying this is your personality. It is, here are the coping mechanisms that you chose based on who you were truly made by God, and don't accurately reflect your whole self. And those coping mechanisms can be super beneficial and save your life to a point, but they can also go to an extreme, and if they go to an extreme, that can become a psychosis. So the Enneagram is really outlining, here's some of the coping mechanisms that you developed in life, and at a healthy, part of this, you are a great, very functional, magnificent person. But if you are under stress or finding yourself not doing well in life, it can go all the way to the point of mental illness. And it will look certain ways for certain temperaments based on the experiences that they had in childhood and the way that they view the world. Does that make sense so far? Yeah. So, while I am there, I am asking the Lord, what am I looking at here? Because how many of you guys know what your number would be on the Enneagram? If you okay, so you guys know. Keep your hands up because I just want to know. Yes, yes, yes. What? I mean, you don't have to know for sure. It's like, okay, and no. And
you don't have to know your number,
you know your number
if you're married to my wife.
What?
Because she will tell me what my number is.
What? What's the
It
range?
may change.
1 through 9.
You have one of those too? Oh, you're totally a 4 today. I don't know if 4 is good or bad.
She's a 4. That's hilarious.
It was just a random number I
5.
picked. It means nothing.
He just threw something out there. He had no idea. So, and you think you might know yours. I know. I didn't know mine. I was the only person there. It was filled with pastors and therapists and human resources professionals. So it was a super great group of people. And everybody knew their number. And I said, I don't know what my number is. And it was like, but nobody's really meant to get anybody else's number, because the point is it's a self-discovery journey for you to determine for yourself not who you are, but what are the coping mechanisms that you have used in your life that may not serve you any longer. And so I'm going to give you an example because this is super helpful. So let's just pick one of the numbers.
3.
Really? I thought
You always go with the number 3.
I know, I do come up with it.
Roger Miller even has a song about the number 3.
Okay, we'll do a 3 first, then we'll go to a 6. Well, yeah. Okay, we'll do a 3, then we'll do a 6. So if you put a 3 up on the board, and if you're wanting to understand, where is God in this, the most beautiful part, I think, about understanding what has happened to you in your journey and that isn't who you are. I mean, that's like we've been doing that journey for how many years together, right? Which is our coping mechanisms. We don't have to be ashamed of them anymore because they aren't our true selves. And thank goodness our true identity was made to overcome every single coping mechanism in our lives that we hate about ourselves. How cool is that? So the number 3. I love it. You are spelling it out. Very, very doctoral of you. Or I'm sorry, very PhD of you. I will be the doctor. You will be the PhD. So, okay. So for those of you who don't know, 3s are known as the successful achiever temperament. So anybody know anything about the 3s that they want to throw out about what a 3 would super value? And I loved this exercise in the class because I thought it was super helpful and the Lord taught me some things. So we're going to do it here. Yes, things about the 3. Efficiency. So totally, they are so efficient and they value efficiency. What else? Anyone else know about 3s? Obviously success is successful achiever, efficiency. Anything else? Titles. They definitely care about titles. Yeah, Bethany. Presentation. They really care about how they're presenting themselves to other people. And they value hard working. So the exercise that we did there that I super appreciated was by Jerome Wagner, who's considered one of the formative people in the United States who brought the Enneagram into like in the 70s into the culture of America. He's the one who taught the class, and this was his exercise. And so here are a few things. Anyone got one more that they want to throw out about the 3? Most people who have a coping mechanism of the 3 would say these are things that are very important to them. So on the flip side, and just put a line down the middle, on the flip side, they would not want to be perceived as lazy. Right, lazy. What is it? Weak. Absolutely. What else? As a failure. Woo! Yeah, that's not good. What else? Anyone? Bueller? So hardworking would be lazy. Presentation of self. They don't want to be seen as weak. They don't want to be seen as a failure. They care about titles. Anything that would be the opposite of that?
Another sheep.
Yeah, a sheep. Excellent. Greg said not anonymous, but sheep is probably even a better description. So this is what I thought, and inefficient, would be really painful for a 3 / Greg. I mean, who said that? I don't know that he's a 3. So
She's just pretending that she doesn't know.
So this is a little bit of, I don't know, actually, I really don't. This is a little bit of Jerome and a little bit of me mixed in together. I love that, right? Because we get to do that. So if we were to realize that this is what the 3 really values, and it's what they work hard to accomplish in their life, they have a tendency to honor this idealized self. So I'm going to have you actually put right here, like kind of big, idealized self. That's the false self. It's the identity that you create in your head about who you are. Many of us would call that the ego, right? It's that part of you that's and not ego as in egotistical, ego as in superego, the ego, and the id. So it is the made up construct about yourself that may or may not be completely accurate about who you are. Okay? So it's the false self. In fact, Scripture would call it what? The flesh. So if you go ahead and put it like in parentheses, the flesh, or the sin nature. It is the idealized self that isn't your true self that pops up and keeps you in striving and keeps you in performance. But these are all really good things you say, right? And they are. But you can see that this person, because they are so successful and efficient, and they care about their presentation of themselves to others, and they're super hardworking, everyone around them is going to look like what? This. It's going to look like this. Everyone around them is going to look like this, right? So then what do? They kick it into higher gear to compensate for all the lazy, weak failures that are sheep and inefficient. because they got to compensate for all the rest of the world that's screwing up. Super fun, right? So you're like, oh yes, yes, right? So they're looking at themselves and other people through a lens, and neither one of these lenses is the whole true self that God made a person to be. Everyone else is not this, and you are probably not this. Because what can a lazy person do that a hard worker cannot do?
Chill. Rest.
Chill out. Rest. Someone should put that in this column, right? What can a weak person do that a successful achiever cannot do?
Pray.
What?
Pray.
Pray.
Ask questions.
Ask questions. Admit a mistake. Ooh, these are so good. It's like your threes. You're channeling the three. What else can let's say a sheep do?
Identify with others.
Yeah, a sheep can identify with others.
Be a good team player. Be a follower.
Follow instructions. Follow someone else. They do not always have to. We should probably put over here, leader. Because they lead. So they can follow instructions. What else can an inefficient person do that an efficient person can't do? Receive help. Oh, that's like you guys are really healthy. So good. Anything else? So, yeah, learn a new way to do something. Be teachable. So, you can see how if you have become over-idealized in these qualities as a coping mechanism, you have lost access to what? A whole part of your true self. Yeah, you've lost touch with a part of yourself that you need. So, how many of you are familiar? Do you mind just flipping the board? Because we'll come back to this. How many of you guys are familiar with the psychological term called splitting? Splitting. Splitting, as in splitting. Anyone?
Related to disassociation or something else?
Kind of. What? Kind of. But, well, no, it's not. I was trying to go with you, but I can't. but it would sound like that. So I'll just give the definition then. But yay, thanks for playing. We have some great parting gifts for you, apparently. So it's super good. Those are it is kind of in that realm. So splitting is a psychological term for what a person does often at a very young age, before the age of 3, when they are experiencing both harm and help from a caregiver. So I'm going to have you put splitting. So when they are experiencing both harm and help, their brain will try to protect them by splitting that person into 2 different people, not themselves, the caregiver. So when they are with the safe caregiver, they are safe and can actually relax and receive care. When they are being harmed, that actually in their mind becomes a different person. And so they split people so that they can survive. All of us do a level of splitting, right? And that is black or white thinking. All or nothing. People are either good or bad, godly or demonic, good or evil. That's splitting. It is the very definition of, you should put good or bad, black or white. That'd be excellent. Thank you. I honestly feel like Gibbs is evolving after Greg.
Whatever.
Like, Gibbs is the archetype of like the actual person.
Good or bad? Black or white?
Black or white. So in order to feel safe, often our minds have a coping mechanism that we have done where we tend to split things. It's the definition of dualistic thinking. Anybody familiar with dualistic thinking? Dualistic thinking is, again, putting everything in a category of good or bad. And that's not entirely wrong, but it doesn't serve us well when we can't handle the fact that there's a whole bunch of things in the world that are what? Mixture. Gray. So let's talk about examples of this in the world. In the world, an example of this is a friend of mine who introduced me to Francois and Andre Rabe and Francois Dutoit. Super great gifts in my life. She read me these excerpts from their stuff, and I was like, I have to know who that is. And she goes, oh, I can't recommend them. And I said, why is that? She's like, I haven't read everything they've written. I'm like, so? I know, right? And she goes, well, I don't know what they, I liked this piece, but I don't know. They might have some really bad theology in other areas. And I'm like, because you think that I don't? I'm pretty confident I hope that 90% of my theology is wrong. I'll be lucky if I got 10% that's accurate. But she's really thinking that it's possible for someone to have all accurate theology for the moment. She no longer thinks that now, because I went, I don't care if they have bad theology. She goes, well, I wouldn't want you to stumble. And I said, I'm a big girl, I can handle it, and I really like this, and I just want to explore for myself. But that's the example of dualistic thinking, which is, here's a person who has one theology that super blesses me, which is theology means what? Our ideas about God. Theos, God, meaning what we think. So theology is what we think about God, right? Who have super great theologies that bless us, and then another theology that wrecks us. And we go, I don't know what to do with that one. They must be bad, dangerous, heretical, right? And this is what we do to what? Feel safe. This kind of splitting, you can just write anything you want to write while we're talking. If you don't mind putting dualistic thinking, that would be great. Thank you. I believe that all of our coping mechanisms are a result of some level of splitting. We have created within our own minds an idealized self and a bad self, and we have scope-gated, that would be scapegoated with the vowels reversed. Some sort of dualism in that, I'm not really sure what it is. We'll have to analyze that later. Scapegoated a very part of ourselves that was never affirmed when we were little. So we learned that being hardworking was successful, but anything perceived as lazy caused us to get whacked. We learned that being intuitive was wrong, but we learned that doing a good job was right. And we started to split ourselves into categories of good and bad. Isn't this so, I'm sorry, this is so good. So we have done this very splitting with ourselves, and we're living in this dualistic mind about ourselves and about everyone else, unable to really fully allow ourselves to realize that the celebration of who Jesus came to be for us was to finally integrate our whole being. Where we no longer assess ourselves as good and bad, but we start to see the beauty in everything. We start to see that on a lazy day, we were actually resting and renewing and relaxing. We find that on an unsuccessful day, we actually had great emotional rest and increased capacity. We start to recognize that the things we've previously judged as bad are actually the very other part of ourselves that we need in order to be truly healthy. Okay, thoughts and comments? It's kind of awesome, right? Okay, it's all me. That's okay. Yeah. Okay, so anyone have a comment? Everyone already know this? Because I did not. And he didn't talk about splitting, but the Lord started talking to me about splitting. And like, this is what's really happening with people. And it's what we tend to do with other people. We idealize them until we see one negative about them, and then we throw them under the bus because they are no longer safe. Yeah, Bethany. Hooray!
I feel like to an extent we do this with God, or our relationship with God involves a lot of splitting.
Yep.
Yeah, because I mean, in a lot of churches, like, we're told God is both like this wrathful, like justice-seeking destroyer, basically, who will punish wickedness, but he's also like the loving Father who will comfort us. And so there's that dualistic mindset towards God of like he's good and he's bad. So sometimes he's safe and sometimes he's not.
Absolutely.
I didn't know that was a term, so that's really cool.
It is super, super cool. And what's super interesting also is that really has been the theology of all gods throughout history. All gods, the mythological characters, were extreme good and extreme bad. They were very capricious. There were no gods that were all loving. None of them. If you talk about the mythological characters and the gods that existed at the time of of course, you know, a couple thousand years, but at the time of the Old Testament, all of those gods were both good and bad. So the interesting thing about the Old Testament is that it often retells the stories of the culture. I don't know if you know that, but there are stories that are biblical stories that are predated by other cultures. So that may be that those stories are really true. It may be that part of Scripture was all about storytelling and changing the story, because all of the biblical accounts take the community story that was happening in the neighboring nation, and they tell a different outcome. So it's a very interesting thing to consider the possibility that they're telling these classic stories, and they're telling about God not because he was really horrible and did these things, and the possibility exists that they're changing the story to really talk about who a God is in the midst of this difficult story as a whole different kind of God. A God who doesn't finish the story the same way that all the other cultures do. Super wild. Okay, yeah, what else?
So
Yeah.
the thought that I had, different alley, hope you don't mind.
You had what?
I said my thought is on a totally different alley than what you guys just were talking about. So I just wanted to preface that we're going to go to someplace else. So anyway, it's that dualism is sort of an opposite of being overly accepting of every, it's like relativism. Like relativism is, just accept everything as it is, and we don't have any standards. We just, love people exactly as they are, and it's all relativistic. It's not really good or bad. It's just relative. And so I just am wondering, those people, there are some people who feel like relativism is in the category of bad. Which I think is hilariously funny that they can do that to relativism. But I'm just wondering, how does that play into this? Do you lose your compass of what is holy and
such a good
beautiful?
Question. That is such a good question. I'm going to answer it for myself. I think this is a personal journey. But here's what I'm learning. I have categorized whole things into the category of bad. Anybody with me? Like, say Disney, I'm just kidding. Just kidding, Nikki. But, haven't with Disney, but right? Let's throw all of these theologies into the category of bad. Let's throw all these religions. Let's throw all these people groups. Let's throw all these people who are struggling with pain and hurt, who have been abused, who become abused, and become abusers. Let's throw them all in the category of bad. And then, we have a Jesus who saves them, but but is still bad. I'm learning how to ask the question. So you might find a different path that's even better than this. I'm learning to ask the question, God, where are you in this? Where are you in this? Because there's this beautiful thing that said that Jesus went into hell itself and took the keys and held captivity captive. And so he has, and that event is still an ongoing event. So he's walking around in every hell. Jesus is walking around. He's even walking around in our hell. He's walking around fully present in our hell with us, taking captivity, those things that hold us captive. And he is awakening us to his presence so that we are aware that those things that have held us captive no longer get to hold us captive. And so my question is, instead of dumping it into the bad bucket, how about pull it out and go, where are you in this? Relationally, where are you in this, Lord? Where are you in this? Where are you in this? So fun, right? So I want to be careful of time, but so exciting because we're looking at, do you mind if I flip the board? Am I allowed to? I'll let you flip the board. What I realized when I was at the Enneagram, the Lord started to show me this is why Desert Outpouring, the community of people, exists. I mean, we have a lot of reasons. But I didn't, you know how you do a thing and then God shows you what you're doing after the fact and you kind of sometimes like, you know, kind of keep stumbling through it. I feel like the Lord keeps giving me better and better understanding and insight as to what this community is really all about. And I feel like He said this atmosphere is a healing atmosphere. And because we are all really truly standing for the magnificence of humanity, I was so hoping there would be no guests today. I'm just going to tell you. I was so hoping there'd be no guests because I wanted our time to be like this precious little like bubble. Because I felt like the Lord was saying, this community standing for the magnificence of humanity is truly an atmosphere of reintegration. It is an atmosphere where it is possible for people to perceive all of themselves as good. Right? That's what we've been sharing for 2 years, is that humanity is magnificent, which is a theology that's out in the world I didn't even know was out there, you know, fully. I didn't know there were like millions and millions of people who are like, don't believe in original sin, that they do believe that humanity is magnificent, and that they have lost their insight about who they truly are. When you are in that atmosphere, you are no longer doing the split. You are in an atmosphere that is embracing the whole you as much as they are embracing all of humanity. And that atmosphere is healing to our very minds. And it goes right back to neuroplasticity, which is the ability for our minds to become flexible, to become curious again, to start asking questions and being unafraid. A brain that's relying on a foundation of relationship with God rather than a concept about God. Woo, right? So good. So how does the Enneagram really help? I think in Scripture it says, do not be conformed to the patterns of this world, right? But be transformed. Anybody finish it off for me? This is the pattern of your world, the extreme parts of yourself that were only affirmed. And so you took up the perceptions of others as your true identity, as a rescue mechanism that later then became your very abuser. And it no longer served you. And so we become transformed by the renewal of our mind when we start to accept and embrace and stop seeing any part of ourselves as bad. And start asking ourselves the question, where, Lord, are you in this? Who can I be here that I couldn't be if I wasn't a wreck, if I wasn't lazy, if I wasn't afraid, if I wasn't over-emotional? What can I be here that I couldn't be if I was capable? So good, right? Yay! Okay, so talk to me for a moment, and we're going to bring up the Baileys. But what are your thoughts? That's okay, you can say your message was super bad. That's Brett, that was, thank you. Jared got it. Tracking with me, you and me. I'm starting to understand why the Lord said it's so important that you be willing to commit to a group of people who will meet every week, because it's important that they're in an atmosphere that continues to transform their mind, and that they're not continually going back into an atmosphere that is counter to their very identity, because it's so much conflict. Because groups who think in certain ways have atmospheres. And our battle is not against our flesh and blood. It is against atmospheres and mindsets. Yes. And it is possible that our greatest struggle with every other person is a window into the very things that we have split. So the people who, I just have to use the P word because it's the people who piss you off the most, the people who frustrate you the most. I mean, that's alliteration, it's so beautiful. Anyway, they didn't even hear over here. It's the people who tick you off the most that are triggering the judgment of what is bad. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not actually abusers. Like, let's be honest here. It's not about accepting abuse. It's not about accepting abusers. But we still get to ask the question, Lord, where are you in the midst of this? And then I'll close with this as they're coming up. I love this. We even have split good and bad in terms of love, right? And God's love is what? Perfect love. And almost all of you have heard me say this. So we have made a what? We've made an idealized self for God on love. It's perfect. It's perfect love. But that word in Greek, when it was spoken of by the people who walked with Jesus, it wasn't perfect as in without flaw or error. It was, do you guys remember the word? It was complete, and a best word to describe it in my mind is healthy. Healthy and complete. And so he goes, it is healthy love. God was always described as having healthy love. Healthy love that casts out fear. Healthy love that saves us. And the very word for being saved, we all know, is sozo. Saved, healed, delivered. It is the very word that describes completeness. The reintegration of ourselves. What? Okay. So, Bailey's.